What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. I hope that you are having a wonderful weekend. I am here for a weekend update. I've been spending the entire weekend really kind of dissecting what's going on here in the cryptocurrency market to try to get a better understanding and do a lot of studying, looking at different charts and different structures to try to say, where are we? So in this video, I'm going to do really kind of a deep dive into the Bitcoin price chart, which is really important because throughout all of history, Bitcoin has told us the story of whether or not cryptocurrency in general is in a bear market or in a bull market. So the big question here is Bitcoin's top in, or are we just having a scary pullback? I think this video is incredibly important because it's something that I think is like really telling the story. And if you're here for some particular altcoin, like if you just care about XRP, if you just care about some other altcoin or something like that, and Bitcoin really isn't that important to you, I've put a lot of work into this, and I think that this one is incredibly important. History has always shown Bitcoin tells the story on whether or not we're in a bull market or a bear market. So we have to determine whether or not Bitcoin is telling us if we're going into a bear market now, or is this just going to be a scary pullback? I'm going to present the argument for both sides and tell you the things that I will be looking for. The first thing we'll do is I'm going to bring back this previous fractal that we've had from previous bull runs within Bitcoin and show how we've had our 2018, 19, and 20 bear market all mimicking the bear market that we've seen previously in this type of run up before. And as we can see here with this same type of structure and then breakout, well, one thing's for sure right here is that Bitcoin never reached all the way up there to $80,000, right? One other thing that we've talked about is laying down a Fibonacci extension, and we could say, hey, look, we still haven't reached all the way out there as well. As a matter of fact, it just looks like we're kind of bouncing around between some Fibonacci's in here. So we haven't reached out to the top Fibonacci level as well. Those two things right there alone make me say, okay, structurally, it's looking like it's topping, but from an extension standpoint, we haven't reached out far enough. Could we be doing something different in here? Is this more just going to be like a ranging correction? If so, what would a ranging correction look like before it would continue moving up higher? We'll dive into that in a minute, but I wanted to show these things right here that, well, we haven't reached out to full extensions, nor have we matched our previous fractals that have matched incredibly well so far, all throughout these years right in here, and then suddenly coming up just a little bit short. One thing we do know is that Coinbase timed their IPO to happen right here. Did they know something we didn't know? Did they just time the top perfectly to dump all of their stock onto the market? We don't know right now, but we'll come back to this here in just a minute. If we go back to what Bitcoin has done during this entire ride up, when we had this moment right in here, this is when CNBC and financial media really started to get into cryptocurrency, or in particular into Bitcoin. This is where Tesla announced that they had purchased $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin to put on their balance sheet, and the laser eyes diamond hands movement began. This is the $58,000 Bitcoin. This is where I went ahead and completed my exit plan for Bitcoin by selling off 65% of it. As Bitcoin fell down, this is where I rotated into the altcoins. Now, I don't ever like to do anything where I have to like sell you that I did something or convince you that I did anything. If I ever refer back to anything that I've ever done, I always like to leave crumbs, leave a track record of what I did. So I make a video discussing it, and then I also have posted it on Twitter that I was buying at that time as well. So every time I sold Bitcoin riding up into here, I was posting it over there on Twitter. Then when I was buying into the altcoin market, I was posting it on Twitter as well, that I had bought right here and that I had bought right here. However, there was one thing that was kind of making me uncomfortable during that time when I was making these purchases, is if you remember correctly, my expectation was that Bitcoin would actually come all the way down to $38,000, is that we would get down into this region for a double tap back test, which is why we're referring to it now. We're talking about it with the total altcoin market cap, and a lot of you are like, we've heard about that recently. It's because we never ended up having this double tap back test in here, and we were just talking about it a couple of months ago back here in February. So could could that be all that this is? That, we had kind of some ranging happening up in here, a little bit of a short squeeze taking out this top, only to come all the way back down to do our double tap back test. Well, if you remember correctly, one of the things we were looking for in this region was that the altcoin market would start to disconnect from Bitcoin. That would show that, hey, we are approaching the top of the Bitcoin bubble, and that we'd be looking for the altcoin market to disconnect during this time. Sure enough, we did have that actually happen. So the altcoins did disconnect during this time. However, that wasn't really a very great run over there in the altcoins, right? We can put a marker right here to show where this disconnect actually began, and we could, I'll zoom this out a little bit, and we could see that the run up in the altcoins as a market as a whole went up 44%, whereas Bitcoin went up 8%. Not exactly the extravagant alt season we were looking for, right? While we did see things like Dogecoin and various other absolutely low cap coins get just completely pumped for no reason, for the most part, we didn't see the whole market go on in alt season, right? But we did see a disconnect occur right in there with that altcoin market right when we were looking for it to happen here with Bitcoin. So that begs the question, was that the actual top then if we did see the disconnect with the altcoin market? Well, let's go look at the actual total altcoin market cap first and see what's going on over here. And what we do see is that the altcoin market has broken out into a new all-time high, and we can see these reactionary levels taking place within the Fibonacci extension levels. And that, as we've been discussing, it's normal to come back in here and have a back test within this double tap that happens on top of the all-time high. Well, for me, nothing really unusual is happening within here, because I see these pullbacks into these double taps, or these back tests into these double taps, happen all the time when you have these on top of a breakout above an all-time high. Then you'll tap up in here, you'll build a support on top of the all-time high, you'll have your breakout even higher, and then it comes back in within here to come test it and confirm it. I've showed that on various different charts, and I will show those again in this video as we continue further down the road here, but it's very normal to have these pullbacks to within this region, which then brings us back over to Bitcoin. I'm going to take all this off the screen so it's a little bit easier to see, but let's say that we are doing something similar to that, right? What if Bitcoin is coming back in here to do its double tap back test? And the big question comes, well, why are we having a double tap way up here, right? Shouldn't a double tap happen right here on top of the all-time high? It seems a little odd that it would be occurring way up here and that we'd come back way back down in here to test it. And I agree, it seems completely odd to me. However, there's one thing that has been blatantly obvious in the news, in the media, and I've been discussing it on my channel, is that for some reason Bitcoin and gold keep getting compared against each other, and I don't know why this is such a huge thing that they keep comparing these two with each other. And I decided to go take a look at the Bitcoin over gold chart to see what's going on over there. And one thing is a little bit odd, is that when we look at when Bitcoin broke out of its all-time high versus gold, is that this moment right in here, this January correction that took place with this double tap, like we're seeing happening right over here on the Bitcoin USD chart, did happen to occur right there on the all-time high versus gold, and that this is the double tap back test versus gold. A little bit strange. But during this time period, we were looking for us to get back down into that level, but it just didn't quite reach it. So is this structure in any way mimicking what happens right before a double tap back test occurs? Is it reasonable to think that we could just be pulling back into here and then afterwards going on to set new highs, and this is just a really scary correction? Because when we look at the gold chart and we look at the double tap on top of the all-time high for gold, it sure would make sense that we do have something very scary show up with Bitcoin versus gold, and then it does go on to continue beating out gold. But I'll take this off the screen and show it again. There is no question right in here that this January correction that happened occurred precisely on the top and back tested identically to the very top of where the gold price chart is, or Bitcoin over gold, which is this moment way up here, much higher than the all-time high for Bitcoin versus the US dollar. So it's interesting, and I find it odd that we see so much discussion of Bitcoin and gold together on financial media everywhere. And one of the other interesting things of the Bitcoin USD chart versus the Bitcoin over gold chart is that when Bitcoin had its capitulative sell-off back in here during the C19 scare back in March of of last year, we could see where the US dollar value of it fell back down into, right? It came down to $3,850, which did not close all of the gaps down in here, right? We still left some open gaps down here on the USD chart, whereas on the Bitcoin over gold chart, when we zoom in on it to see if those gaps did get closed, they sure enough did all get closed precisely over here on the Bitcoin gold chart. So we're seeing more of a comparison to gold because it's actually trading versus gold. I don't really know, but I do see these things being quite interesting. And as you guys know, I've expressed my frustration and wonder on why is gold being discussed so much amongst Bitcoiners and financial media when we're talking about Bitcoin and gold together all the time. So I thought this chart was incredibly interesting to see that the double tap actually did occur right here on top of the all-time high for Bitcoin versus gold, and that if there is a double tap back test coming in here rather than a top for Bitcoin, that it would make a lot of logical sense to get your push all the way back down into there, which on the Bitcoin USD chart is really anywhere in that region right in there between 42,000 all the way down to 32,000. Huge range. And if you'd like to see some examples of why that range is so huge, I'll show you some examples here of double tap back tests. This is Ethereum after it double tapped on top of its all-time high back in 2017. Here it is coming back in for its back test. And you can see over here on Coinbase, it came all the way down to about $460. I'll zoom in just a little bit closer. $460 over here on Coinbase, whereas over here on Kraken, you can see that it came down to 512. That's a big difference. 460 to 512, that's over a 10% difference. And we can see right in here on Kraken, it did not even come below this high over here. Yet on Coinbase, not only did it take out that high, it came way deep down in here, all the way down to 460 versus 512. And we could see over here on Binance that same moment, which is right here, it came down to 505. So we have 460, 505, 512. When we look at the Dow Jones, when it had its double tap back test right in here, and we're going to look at this structure here in just a second because it looks incredibly similar to what Bitcoin looks like right now, meaning Bitcoin would be somewhere like right in here. But as we can see that this pullback right down in here into this double tap back test did not take out this high over here, but kind of got caught up right here in this bull flag for the Dow Jones. Did not come much deeper, really came down to about this high that was right over here. Same thing with the SPX, came in a little bit on the higher end. Whereas some of these leveraged ETFs came way deep down into the double tap back test, whereas, you know, those like the Dow Jones and the SPX were holding themselves way up here. We could see some of them coming much deeper. Here's another example of another one that is a leveraged ETF that came down below that bull flag and down to the next one. So we see them happening all throughout different areas of this double tap, including here in the Dow Jones, the SPX, leveraged ETFs, and we even see it happening at different spots even over here on Ethereum. And also when Bitcoin did have a double tap back test back in the 2017 bull run, you can see that here's one of those bull flags like we saw that got stopped by the Dow Jones and the SPX and Ethereum, but however, Bitcoin did come much deeper down in here, all the way down in here. So it's really this giant range, and I've never been able to pinpoint which one is the stopping point, but really just that the whole area is somewhere where it happens in. So it gets back to looking at that it's just a giant range between 42 and 32,000. I'll take those off. We saw in multiple examples in the stock market that was that stopping point, was this last one right in here was where it got stopped, and then it bounced from there. Then we saw in Bitcoin, we've seen it go down as low as that as well. And some of those leveraged ETFs came down in here as well. So it's a big area. If we lay down some Fibonacci's on there and we say, hey, it's just going to go all the way back for a full retracement all the way back in there, you'd be looking at about 37,500, which does take us to that first one right in there. And that's a full 786 pullback. So we're kind of talking about multiple things in here, right? We're talking about the potential that we're doing a double tap back test over here on the Bitcoin price chart, where when we compare Bitcoin versus gold, that whole correction that we had back in January was a back test of the all-time high of Bitcoin versus gold, which we have seen correlations with Bitcoin versus gold when we did have the C19 sell-off in March of 2020 that came down and closed the gaps and double tapped the bottom to confirm the bottom as support. Then as it broke out, it did back test the all-time high. We see the breakout. We never had a retest of the support level in this breakout, this secondary breakout that happened here. Is it possible that we're just pulling back in to have that right now, which for the Bitcoin price chart would mean that we pull back down into these price levels down in here, somewhere around $37,000, kind of seems to be like the average area, 37,000. This also coincides with what we're seeing over there on the total altcoin market cap, that we are looking for a double tap back test at the same time. So it makes sense. Hey, we're having the same thing happening over in Bitcoin that we're looking for to be happening over here in the total altcoin market cap. And at the same time, we haven't seen the full reach out for the Fibonacci extensions for Bitcoin, and we also haven't seen it match this previous fractal extension to get all the way up there. So are there signs showing us that maybe it's not the top and that we are just back testing before going on to set the top? Now, if you want to get scared just a little bit too, it's important for me to at least show this to you. What if this was just kind of an overextension that happened for Bitcoin back in here? And what if we just kind of use the extension from back here on the previous fractal right in there? Well, we actually nailed it completely perfect. So there always has to be in the back of my mind that, you know what, there's this chance that Bitcoin has already topped and that Coinbase IPO'd on top day to get top dollar for their stock price. So we're going to keep diving deeper, and that's why this video is a little bit longer. We're going to dive into it deeper to say, is it still possible? Can we see other signs that would tell us that we're just doing a double tap back test and that this is not the top? And then at the same time, what are the things that I'm going to be looking for in the retracement after Bitcoin does fall to tell me that, hey, you know what, it's time for me to start de-risking, it's time for me to start selling, it's time for me to pull the plug on some stuff because it doesn't look like it's going to reach out to target. When am I going to have to make that call for myself if I do see signs that tell me it's just too risky at this point? So we're going to start diving into the idea that it could be doing a double tap back test. But one thing I do want to point to is that this market is now in fear. This is the first time we have seen this much fear in the market in nearly a year. We can look back here at this chart, kind of graphing out the historical fear and greed in this market. You can see how long greed has been going on since November, and then now we are way down here in fear, and you can see we have not been there since April 29th, April 30th of 2020. So we have a fearful market. Typically when markets top and they go back into their retraces, we have something called return to normal, where the market completely believes it's just a buy the dip situation, keep on going. I'm seeing sentiment out there. People are pretty scared right now. If this thing does dip down even further, I don't think we're having that type of moment where the people are thinking it's just a return to normal yet. So I'm seeing sentiment signs that are different from what it was like at the top of 2017. I was in this market the whole ride up in 2017. I was in the entire bear market of 2018, the bottoming of 2019, and the terror of C19 of 2020, and then the whole ride up here in 2021. I've been through this market to see the sentiment of what it's been like the whole way. And I remember that sentiment of 2017, how excited and laser eyes it was like, diamond eyes, whatever, diamond hands. But that when the dip came, people were still in that euphoric state. And right now you can kind of sense it out there. There's a lot of worry out there right now, and that we can even see it over here on this sentiment graph that, you know, we're at the lowest level of sentiment that we've seen in almost a year, since almost C19. So typically in order for bottoms to come in, people have to believe that it's not going to be the bottom and that the market is completely over. It's not until people who are completely convinced it's going to keep going up forever that the top does come in. So I thought I'd point to that we do have a change in sentiment happening right now that is different from what we've seen for nearly a year. We have the most fear in the market that we've had. And it's hard to believe all these people the people who have been around for such a long time. Remember how much time we spent in that extreme fear. That moment's long gone. That has been a year since all of that happened. So the thing is, I look over here at the Bitcoin chart and I say to myself, all right, can we make a case for it? Can we actually, like, outside of wishful thinking and wishful hoping that the top isn't in for Bitcoin, can we make a legitimate argument that it is going to pull back down in here and that it is going to bounce out of here and that the top of the market isn't in? You know, we're at $50,000 Bitcoin. We have a lot of fear. We have the most fear we've had in a long time. Whereas right here, just at this exact same price level right over here, I mean, this is when Tesla announced their stuff, right? This is where Laser Eyes and Diamond Hands was going crazy right in here, where people were calling me a dingus for selling my Bitcoin because, you know, they're going to buy it off me. They're going to become filthy rich and I don't know what I'm doing. That's when they were extremely greedy and extremely excited. Yet here we are at the exact same price, and there's a massive amount of fear. A little strange for a top, right? To have that much fear at a top. So can we create the case that we are just, having a correction? And the thing is, does this structure right in here look similar to what we've seen before double tap back tests? This is the double tap back test I've been talking about over here on Bitcoin back in October and November. Here is your double tap with your 2 sets of bull flags, then your breakout, then 1, 2, 3, with a little bit of a squeeze that happens right up in here. And I remember this moment very clearly when it happened. Everybody thought the market was completely breaking out and going way higher. And it happened so fast that it suddenly just turned on itself and then started crashing all the way back down into that double tap area. What we saw, there was 3 new highs that were set prior to that occurring. As we can see over here on Bitcoin, we have 3 new highs with one kind of breakout and then it falling on itself, right? Similar to what happened back in here, heading back down into the double tap back test. The same kind of thing happened with the Dow Jones Industrial Average in 2017, 18, 19, and then in 20 is when it all came falling down. But we had 3 kind of rises here. Well, this one did come down a little bit lower, but we can see that there was these rises. And then right in here is where all of that repo madness stuff started happening and the Fed started injecting liquidity in the overnight repo lending market. We had the short squeeze take it up a little bit higher and then boom, crashing down it comes. So we have, again, 1, 2, 3, and then crashing back down into the double tap back test, which we have 1, 2, 3 with that short squeeze right there at the top. Here's that Ethereum moment we keep talking about. Here's the 2 taps. Here's your bull flag, and then your big breakout followed by 2 more pushes up here. And then the fall back down to the double tap. Bitcoin, your big breakout, followed by 2 more, and then your fallback, which would still mean, right, it still has a ways down to go. So this whole structure has been seen before the double tap back test does happen with this little short squeeze that happens right here at the top. But the thing we keep seeing in all of them is that if this thing does do this, it is incredibly scary when it does actually happen. And so if we think the fear is bad right now, you would certainly see extreme fear. And so from a percentage standpoint of where we're at right now, how deep would that fall be down to 37,000? Be looking at about a 25, 26% if you just get down there to 37. Of course, you can go deeper, right? Get down to 32%, maybe a little bit higher up there near 20%. But if you did right there to 37, you'd be looking at about 25, 26%. What would the total altcoin market cap look like with that type of a fall right in here? Well, gets you right down into that bull flag, into that double tap back test right in there. We keep talking about XRP having that pullback down to that breakout level that held it down for all these years, right? We were held down by this by 3 years. What would happen if we pulled back to that price level like our previous fractal shows? What type of percentage fall would we be seeing? Somewhere around that same type price level, about 28%, 25, 30%, somewhere in that area as well. So I think the case for Bitcoin to fall is there. I'd see just too many things, whether or not Bitcoin has already topped or if it's doing a double tap back test. Both those cases indicate that Bitcoin is going to fall. And not only that, we see it over here on the altcoin market that it looks like it's going to fall as well. And one other thing that I look for is I look for those leading indicators throughout the rest of the market to see if anything is really taking off. And we can look over here on the right side of the screen. When things were really hot and things were really crazy, you had several stuff going 20, 30, 40, 50% in a day, right? Over the last several days, we haven't had that happen at all anywhere in the market, and we're still not seeing that. Yeah, we see 6, 7%, stuff like that, but nothing that is like, hey, I'm fully recovered and I'm going on, breaking out, going crazy right now. We don't have any of those early signs happening right now in the cryptocurrency market, which warns me that, hey, there's probably further downside still coming. But all right, so we've talked about a couple of different things. We've talked about how, Bitcoin's reached up real close to those tops, right? It's almost reached out to the full fractals. It's almost reached out to the full Fibonacci extensions. There's that potential that Bitcoin's top is already in. And now we've talked about the potential of it just doing this double tap back test. So what would it look like from a recovery standpoint if it is just double tap back testing and this is just a correction that's going to have a capitulative ending and then it's going to fire up to the upside and the fun on just keeps on going. What would that recovery look like compared to what a recovery would look like if the top of Bitcoin is already in? Even when tops come in for, Bitcoin, it doesn't just go all the way down. If Bitcoin is going to crash all the way back down to what I think during the next bear market, our bottom's going to be coming back in down here. I know that's displeasing to a lot of people to think that Bitcoin's going to fall all the way back down to what the high was in June of 2019. That's just my personal opinion. But if it is going to go down there right now, it doesn't usually go in a straight line. As you can see, there's lots of bounces that take place along heading down to finally reach down to a target. That happens in all bear markets, that they don't go down in straight lines. They have ups and downs to get there, but they trend in a particular direction. So if we were going to be heading down and if the bull market was completely over, typically what we see is this type of ABC correction that takes place in here, where we come down with an ABC. However, when we have a double tap back test in this type of circumstance, we have what's called a V bottom. And that's what you've probably heard so many times about in the stock market, on financial media, looking for that V bottom. And they were right. That's what you look for when you come back in to back test a double tap. That is why the Dow Jones did end up doing a V bottom and completely V'd its way out of there. Whereas when a top comes in for a market, we typically see this ABC correction with a standard retrace of like a 702 Fibonacci retracement with an ABC to get our way there, not a V bottom. Considering that the total altcoin market cap still looks to me like it has at least one more push up left in it, it seems more likely to me that Bitcoin is going to V bottom, considering it hasn't reached out to its targets quite yet. But like I've mentioned, I've never been more nervous of Bitcoin, because at these prices, even if it does go higher, I just don't see much left in it at all. And if Bitcoin's top does come in, well, we've seen in the previous alt seasons, we've seen in the previous market cycles that the altcoin market does continue to rise into Bitcoin's retrace. So if Bitcoin is just going to ABC after this fall, we have seen in previous market cycles, the altcoin market does not top until well after Bitcoin does. We can see over here that the altcoin market had this big knockback that took place way over here, December 21st, right? Bitcoin topped around that time, knocked back, and then the altcoin market went on for one more push into January. Whereas Bitcoin's top came in right there on December 17th, had a big knockback, and then its retracement end right there, January 5th, January 6th, in which the altcoin market had its knockback, but then went on to set another new high there, January 5th. So if Bitcoin's top is in, we have seen it to where the altcoin market goes on for one more big push into that time. And from a Fibonacci standpoint and a structure standpoint, it makes perfect sense to me that there is still further upside for the total altcoin market cap. But then, of course, there comes down to the part where what if this is all just unnecessary worry and we're just coming down to the bottom of our range and we're still just range bound in here, and it's going to continue its way up and do something similar to what we saw back in here. As we saw earlier, the market is now in fear, yet it's at the same prices of when it was in extreme greed and when Tesla announced they were adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. So have prices changed drastically since then, or is it just sentiment that's changing drastically since then? Tried to present the case that, well, we've seen these structures, we've seen double tap back tests. It seems pretty likely to me that's what's going to be happening. If not, if there is some type of move up to the upside, then it was all unnecessary worry. However, you better believe I'll start getting really, really bearish if prices start getting up into these levels for Bitcoin, and there will be no more discussion for me about whether or not there's going to eventually be a double tap back test, but I'll be sitting there thinking that the top of this market is in for Bitcoin. Because when it comes to the technical indicators, just the simple stuff, the RSI and the MACD on the weekly time frame, we can see these bearish divergences starting to show up. We can see the rollover of the MACD starting to happen over here on Bitcoin. And it's been an incredible ride up over here in Bitcoin, but it is getting up there. We hit $65,000. I think a lot of actors in this space did a really good job of luring retail into Bitcoin up in here. But this is where my mind is kind of at right now. I wanted to show you all the things that I'm looking at. I don't have the answers for you on which one it's going to do, but I'm showing you the scenarios that I'm looking for. So when something does play out, we can kind of be like, all right, we talked about this type of scenario playing out. If that's what's happening, here's how I'm going to react to that. So if Bitcoin starts plunging its way down to the downside, what's the thing I'm going to be looking for? I'm going to be looking for it to V-bottom its way on out of here, right? Looking for those altcoins to continue rampaging while Bitcoin's V-bottoming out. If Bitcoin plunges all the way out here, then it does a retrace and it kind of starts to ABC itself. Well, that's going to give me some worry that, you know what, the top of Bitcoin's already in. I need to start making my exit plans and pull the plugs on some stuff a little bit early. Or if none of that even ends up happening, but Bitcoin starts marching its way back up here, just like we saw happen back in here, and then we're looking for that top to get ready to come in, looking for kind of like a 7-wave structure to take us up there, and then that's where the real top of Bitcoin is in. There wouldn't be any thought process for me in regards to double tap back tests, and it would just be talking about, you know what, we're getting ready for the whole thing to come crashing down for Bitcoin. So for those who actually have the longer term perspective on wanting Bitcoin to go to 300,000, and if you want me to be on board with that potential being out there, the only way I even see that potentially even happening, that Bitcoin can march up to those higher prices, is if it does that double tap back test with that V bottom out of there. Then I could see a scenario where it does march up significantly higher. However, if it's just started marching up right here from where we're at right now, I'd be looking for a top of Bitcoin to be coming in, and that's the end of the bull run for Bitcoin. So for those who have that longer preference and want that $300,000 Bitcoin, I think the best case for you for that structural standpoint is that V bottom does come back in way down there, which would mean that probably this next week that we're going into, we'll probably get some pretty scary narratives coming out of governments and stuff, right? But we'll just have to wait and see. And I wanted to show you the things that are going on in my mind right now. So, all right, that's going to wrap it up for this one. I thought I would just put that out there that I think we could be in for a scary week ahead. And I'd rather us be surprised with a really happy and exciting week than be completely shocked and scared by a scary one. The good news about it all, if you just take a step back and think about it all, is that total altcoin market cap shows that it wants to keep on marching higher. So what we're trying to determine is whether or not if that next march higher is going to be an important significant one, or if this market's going to keep going much, much higher after that. So right now it's a wait and see to see how Bitcoin reacts. If Bitcoin just kind of marches up to a new high now, or if it has that really big fall, what is the structure of that recovery bounce going to look like? Will we look like a V bottom and Bitcoin's just going to keep on marching and this market's going to go crazy high? Or are we going to see kind of that ABC correction come out of Bitcoin, in which in previous bull markets we've seen the altcoin market continue to march higher during that correction phase, and then, you know, kind of determine where we're at that point. But that's what I see. It's just my thoughts, just my opinions on one guy. I hope that you guys are having a fantastic weekend. I wish I could come on here, and I know we're real excited. We've had such a glorious 6 months, right, of up, 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 up. That this is the first real big test for a lot of people. But I'm still long this market. I'm still fully in this market, in particular the altcoin market. But I think it's always important for us to know where we're at. And it's that Bitcoin has risen a drastic amount in this bull run, nearly reaching all the way out to the full Fibonacci extension. Coinbase decided to IPO when they did. But the good news is I still fully believe that altcoin market's going to continue marching up higher. We just need to watch and see how these markets are going to be behaving going into that moment and see if we're seeing the signs of the top of the altcoin markets coming too. But all right, I'll wrap this thing up. I hope you're having a great weekend. Happy Sunday. If you'd like, you can check out my website over here, bcbacker.com. This is my course where I deep dive into the previous Bitcoin bull runs, the different altcoin seasons that we've had, tying them all together of when they've occurred, what times they've occurred. I talk about my exit plans. I talk about percentages, talk about rotation and mathematics. You can check all of this out over here on my website, bcbacker.com. You can, of course, follow me over here on Twitter at bcbacker. And boom, we did it. We hit 100,000 followers. That's insane. That's amazing. And I want to thank you guys so much for watching my channel. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need to pick me up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.